On July 19, 2021, the Ernest Childers VA Outpatient Clinic, located at 8921 South Mingo Road in Tulsa, opened its doors for veterans in eastern Oklahoma. The clinic is named after Ernest Childers, a U.S. Army officer who became the first American Indian to be awarded the Medal of Honor for heroism during World War II. A native of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, Childers was born into the Muskogee or Creek Nation on February 1st, 1918. He grew up in abject poverty with 4 brothers and attended Chilocco Indian Agricultural School, a boarding school for American Indians. While a student at Chilocco, Childers joined a National Guard unit, which transitioned to active duty as the 45th Infantry Division of the U.S. Army. He moved through the ranks as the unit trained and prepared for action in Italy. Upon their arrival in September 1943, the 45th Infantry commenced an organized assault on Oliveto, a town occupied by German forces. Childers' heroic actions during the battle earned him the Medal of Honor, the military's highest decoration. His daughter, Elaine Childers, reads the citation.
Citation. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 30, 1863, has awarded in the name of the Congressional Medal of Honor to Second Lieutenant Ernest Childers, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Second Lieutenant Ernest Childers distinguished himself by conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his own life above and beyond the call of duty in action on 22 September 1943 in Oliveto, Italy. Although Lieutenant Childers previously had just suffered a fractured instep, he, with 8 enlisted men, advanced up a hill toward enemy machine gun nests. The group advanced to a rock wall overlooking a cornfield, and Lieutenant Childers ordered a base of fire laid across the field so that he could advance. When he was fired upon by 2 enemy snipers from a nearby house, he killed both of them. He moved behind the machine gun nests and killed the occupants of the nearer one. He continued toward the second one and threw rocks into it. When the 2 occupants of the nest raised up, he shot one. The other was killed by one of the 8 enlisted men. Lieutenant Childers continued his advance toward a house farther up the hill and single-handed captured an enemy mortar observer. The exceptional leadership, initiative, calmness under fire, and conspicuous gallantry displayed by Lieutenant Childers were an inspiration to his men.
Childers survived the war, married, and raised a family. He remained in the U.S. Army until he retired in 1965 with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Many people don't know there's a story behind Lieutenant Colonel Childers' Medal of Honor, and Elaine Childers reads this fascinating story in her father's own words.
I have to first say that Dad never talked about his experiences until he retired, and after he revisited the battleground where he was finally able to mourn his fallen friends. Only after that trip was he able to record this story. There's a lot more leading up to this than what appears in the citation. Before daylight, near the town of Oliveto, we came around the edge of a walled cemetery. Earlier, a large artillery shell had hit the center of the road, and I started running across the road. I fell in that particular artillery hole, twisting and turning as I fell forward. That is what caused the fracture of my instep, which naturally created a considerable amount of pain. Up in the entrance of the cemetery was a machine gun nest covering the road. And just as I fell, the machine gun opened fire, and the bullets were going over my back, and occasionally some would go through my clothing or the pack on my back. So I just started rolling over and over until I reached the ditch. I was more or less safe in that position. One of the soldiers that was in my company opened fire on that machine gun nest and did eliminate it. There was a large stone building on the edge of town where the medical unit set up a temporary aid station. The wounded were brought in that building to receive first aid, and I was told to go there. But there were so many people already being taken care of that I sort of had to wait my turn to get in, being as I wasn't a dying patient at that time. I laid down outside the building with some other soldiers waiting to be treated. A large artillery shell came over and hit the roof, and the explosion was frightening. People who were being treated received additional wounds, and the doctor who was going to do the treating was hit and killed. It was obvious to me that that was not exactly a safe place to be, so I went back to my company. From then on, I was crawling because of my leg and pain. I crawled on my hands and knees around the building and around the cemetery, thinking I was heading toward the rear of our lines and at least getting out of the line of fire. I thought I was in the rear, but I was in the rear of the Germans. By that time, I had made contact with several members of my platoon, and seeing that we were being behind the German lines, I decided that somebody has got to do something, because you can't sit there and do nothing. Anyhow, as the citation says, I ordered some of the men to lay down a base of fire, and we started advancing up the hill. At that point, there was a terrace. I could tell there were Germans there, and I told my men to line up along this terrace and start firing in that direction. When I got up 25 or 30 yards next to this building, that's when I noticed two German riflemen, and they exposed themselves. So, naturally, my being a pretty good shot, and knowing how to shoot quails in flight as well as rabbits running, I made a couple of quick shots and eliminated those two. Another 100 yards or so, I came up behind a machine gun nest. They heard the shots and saw me, and they turned the machine gun around and began firing back on me. And they got pretty close a lot of times too, knocking dust and dirt all around and in my face. And I opened fire on them and was able to eliminate that machine gun nest. We continued on up the hill to this second machine gun nest, which was some 30-40 yards further on up the hill. As I was crawling up to that one, they also turned the machine gun around facing me, and I wasn't necessarily getting a good shot at them because they were peeking through the little peepholes in the machine gun nest. Finally, as I was crawling along, I put my hand on a rock, which was the size of a baseball or a softball. Why, and no one knows why, you would do things because you don't think about it. If you just do things. And I thought I'd throw that rock. My thought was, if I hit them on the head, they got a steel helmet on. Maybe if I don't do anything else, excuse me, I'll give them a headache. So I threw the rock, and my aim wasn't all that good. I sort of went down in between them. It was a large enough rock that they must have thought that particular rock was a hand grenade that I threw in there. And so, when that rock went down in between them, in that foxhole, they decided it was a hand grenade and they jumped out. Like I said, I used to be able to get rabbits running and quails flying. And as one of them jumped out, I got him before he even got completely clear of the foxhole. Then the other guy jumped out. My troops on the other side of the terrace could see what was going on, so they were firing too. I never really know whether I hit the guy or someone else hit him. But anyhow, that machine gun nest was eliminated, and that is part of the citation. As I continued to crawl on up the hill, there was a small stone building. When I came up to that, there was a German artillery observer there. He came out to give up with his hands up. So the first thing he done, naturally, was to pull off his helmet and throw it down and unbuckle his pistol belt with his pistol and drop that and came on further out with his hands up. And I thought, why bother? Here I am crawling and I couldn't take a prisoner anyway. So I decided just to eliminate him. As I pulled the trigger, the weapon snapped, but didn't fire. Just made a snapping noise. So right away I knew that I was in real trouble because I was completely out of ammunition at that point. I could see one of my troops a short distance away, so I hollered at him to come over and take this guy prisoner. His remarks were to the effect, "Well, shoot the son of a whatever you want to call him." So I replied, "I can't shoot the son of a you-know-what because I'm out of ammunition." So he was the only German who survived that particular battle. Of course, this doesn't appear on the citation. It merely says, "Captured him single-handed." After the tape recorder was turned off, Dad told me something that I have never forgotten. "Elaine, the minute I pulled that trigger and nothing happened, my belief in God became set in me as hard and enduring as stone. I knew that God kept me from shooting an unarmed man. I may not go to church every Sunday, but my faith in God is deep and unshakable. And that's why my favorite song is Onward, Christian Soldiers. Because I was a Christian soldier that day." I will always remember Dad's words and how his respectful treatment of everyone who met or spoke with him was witness to his deep and abiding belief in God, and how God is always present in our lives.